following is a presentation of the Logan Media Network. From the Grove to the Junction, it's the Brad Logan Show. It's time for the Brad Logan Show. Your home for sports in the Magnolia State. To be a part of the program, email the show, bradloganshow@yahoo.com, or shoot him a DM on Twitter @BradLoganCote, and find the show on YouTube. And now, from the Grove to the Junction, here's your host, Brad Logan.
And now we welcome in John Cox, Mississippi Morning quarterback here in a very interesting week as we kind of recap the weekend that was. Ole Miss, of course, was open, and Mississippi State had multiple chances against LSU, and John, we'll get into it. They just couldn't do anything on the goal line. They missed a field goal when Mike elected to kick it, and it wasn't Mississippi State's day, and it hasn't been Mississippi State's year so far.
Yeah, Murphy's Law was working hard on Mississippi State the other day. I mean, if anything could go wrong, it did. Their red zone offense leaves a lot to be desired, and I didn't understand it because I thought they ran the ball well early in the game, and then they just decided, that was working way too well, and they got the running backs banged up a little bit, but they quit running it. They couldn't get anything in the short yardage. I don't know. It was just, they're just not consistent. There's no other way I know. I mean, I'm master of the obvious, but they have yet to put together even 2.5 good quarters of a 4-quarter football game.
2-2 in the year of wins, of course, over Louisiana Tech when they came back and beat Louisiana Tech there at the end, and La Tech misses the field goal, and they beat NC State, who, I mean, all of a sudden NC State's good. They're ranked, so you tell me. Of course, they lost to Memphis, and they backed that up with a loss to LSU on Saturday. I listened to the game, listened to all of it, and it's almost like I couldn't really understand how they were losing because I was following on a StatCaster, and the score was 21-3, and they had doubled LSU in every statistical category, John. I'm not just kidding. It was every one. I mean, just listen to this. Even at the end of the game, here's how it finished up. First downs, Mississippi State 29, LSU 15. Third down efficiency. This team lost, by the way. They were 12 of 18 on third down, and they lost. LSU, 5 of 13. The numbers just don't add up. Total yards, 486 for Mississippi State, 343 for LSU. Bulldogs threw it for 371. LSU threw it for 280. Max Johnson was 17 of 27 for 280 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Will Rogers, 47 of 62, 371 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. They rushed it for 115, that Mississippi State did, and then LSU only 63 yards. MSU defense played pretty well. So I had to come home and I watched it again because I wanted to see it, just to see what had happened. The first drive, Mississippi State goes down the field and fumbles the football away at LSU's 20. They eventually come down, drive down, and throw it to Butte. He scores. They go up 7-0. So Mississippi State, another methodical drive, great drive, all the way down to the 2-yard line. They don't go for it this time. They kick the field goal, 7-3. Defense does a great job again. Holds LSU, and they punt back to Mississippi State. Bulldogs, once again, methodical drive, all the way down the field. Gets to around the, 5 or 6 maybe, wide left on the field goal. So it's 7-3, and Mississippi State has had 3 huge drives. They've only got 3 points.
Yeah. It's, I watched the game the other day, and I mean, in every game, and I guess I've watched probably every one of Mississippi State's games this year. Every game, they go through just stretches of the game where they are just not very good. They're always methodical. I mean, you kept saying that. They do move it. They get a first down. But then, after a couple first downs or, they'll get a short yardage and then they'll have to punt or they won't hit it. I mean, Will Rogers missed a wide open receiver the other day; would have been a touchdown on third down, and then something like that will happen, and they let the other team just hang around, and the other team will bust a play or something like that. And we keep seeing Mississippi State scoring a bunch of points late in the game. Well, hell, they're down 21 by that time.
Yeah,
and so I don't know. I mean, they're the lowest scoring air raid team in the history of football. I mean, usually those teams are used to throwing up, massive numbers. And I mean, they throw it 70 times a game and score 14 points. I mean, I don't know. I was wondering today, and at some point, I think there's some playmakers on that offense.
I have no doubt there are. I mean,
I think those receivers are good. I think Wiley's a good wide receiver. I think the kid, the transfer from this year that came in, is a very good wide receiver. But I don't know enough about it. I'm not educated enough. But sometimes, at some point, you just have to scheme your scheme to get your best players the ball. And I'm not sure they're doing that in Starkville right now. I think they're just running their scheme. And if John Cox catches it, it's just as great as if Jaden Wally catches it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier with the scoring drives. I mean, it easily, in my opinion, it could have been 21-0 at the half, Mississippi State, because the 7 points that LSU got in the first half was off of the Malik Heath fumble inside the 20. It was a good lick, but I mean, you got to hold on to the ball. Only get 3 points on 3 really good drives. And, of course, in the second half, it opens up LSU, Keyshawn Butte, 64-yard bomb from Max Johnson, busted coverage. It was busted coverage at 14 minutes to go in the third quarter, and it's 14-3. The next one, John, it was about 3 minutes to go in the third quarter. Trey Palmer's a 58-yard touchdown. I mean, they're just big plays. Just big chunk plays. Max Johnson completes to Trey Palmer, and there wasn't anybody within 20 yards of him.
Yeah,
maybe 30. I mean, he was just wide open. And I watched Preston, the free safety. He came up, and there was no communication, and Palmer was just waving his hands like the dude on Necessary Roughness, and he was just just backed into the end zone.
Well, I mean, the defense is out there, and I mean, there's going to be busted coverages, and you feel bad because, like you said, the defense plays pretty well, and they play pretty well every week. They're going to give up big plays. They're going to give up yards. I mean, everybody does. It's the nature of college football right now. But you just got to wonder sometimes. Like I said, there's always stretches in their games where the offense doesn't get anything done, and it's a weird not getting anything done. It's like they go down the field, teams are content to drop 8. It's not really tricky how teams are defending Mississippi State. And then all of a sudden, when the field shortens, we talk about the red zone or something like that. Well, then it's really, if you're not going to throw the ball behind me, and I'm being the defense, I'll just go up and tackle you. And they will not commit to the run. I mean, I don't know why. Dylan Johnson's a good running back. Marks is a good running back. They're tough, but they do not commit to it. But you feel bad because the defense is hanging around. Like I said, it should have been 21-0. Well, it was 21-3 before they could blink. And so,
yeah, in the first touchdown, I think you nailed it. Just earlier, you talked about how Mississippi State just doesn't do anything in the first couple of quarters offensively. They don't score the first touchdown until 26 seconds to go in the third quarter. Yeah. That's when it was a throw and catch from Will Rogers to Mekhi Polk, 29-yard touchdown pass, cuts the lead to 21-10. And you thought, you know what? This may be the chance. This may be an opportunity. And that's, of course, when Mississippi State does a great job and holds LSU at 3 and out, and you feel like this is it. And all of a sudden, Mississippi State gets busted for a penalty because they jump over on the punt return. You can't jump or hurdle or whatever the deal is, the blockers on the punt team. At that point, it gives LSU a free first down. And Max Johnson hits Cole Taylor, 41 yards out, touchdown, 28-10, and it was kind of all but over at that point, 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. But just like a Mike Leach team, they they pad the books after that, score 2 touchdowns, and it was a 2-point conversion, I think, there at the end too, to make it look even better. It's a lot of these points come in the later part of the game, and I guess if Mike knew the answer to this, he would probably implement it. But it feels like this team doesn't, score a lot of points until late in the game. Maybe that's because the defense is laxing. I don't know why there's not more of a sense of urgency, but this is the second time in a row. Actually, the third time this season, John. It was 31-17 in the opening game of the year with 13 minutes to go in the game against Louisiana Tech when they turned it on. Memphis, they turned it on there at the end, and then against LSU they turned it on. I don't know why they're doing this and not doing more in the earlier parts of the games. And the question, I guess, now is what happens this weekend at Texas A&M. Is this an opportunity for Mississippi State to kind of get right, or is Texas A&M going to exercise some demons after the loss to Arkansas? This does not feel like a really good opportunity for Mississippi State Saturday.
Oh, I mean, it's not, and is that at Texas A&M or is it?
It's in College Station, yes.
Yeah, that's a very tough place to play. There'll be what will seem like 8 million Texans there, and A&M did not look good the other day. But they didn't look good on offense the other day. I mean, I thought defensively, they're still a pretty good defense. Mississippi State just looks, you said it a minute ago, there's no sense of urgency. I mean, they have, like I keep mentioning, these 2 receivers. That Polk was a receiver's name I couldn't think of. They have pretty good wide receivers, yet Mississippi State seems content to let their running backs lead the world in catches. And they just check down, and it takes, you say they're down late in the game. It takes them 20 plays to get down the field. And going into College Station, you look up. I think Mississippi State will be defensively fine. Like I said, I didn't think any of them looked good on defense, the backup quarterback in, or look good on offense, rather. But, dear Lord, you don't want to fall behind there, and it could just avalanche. There's a disconnect somewhere in that right now, and I can't figure out where watching Mississippi State. It's like there is no sense of urgency, and I don't know who to point the finger at on that one.
Well, they need to figure it out pretty quick. They've got Texas A&M coming up on Saturday, and then following that, they've got Alabama and Starkville, and that's 2 tough outs for Mississippi State. We said this 3 stretch between LSU, Texas A&M, and Alabama was going to be a tough stretch. So with the emergence of Auburn, they played pretty well. Penn State kind of were, I'm not going to say we're given a game against Georgia State, but they were given a call late in the game when that guy obviously didn't catch the ball and made it easier to get that field goal. So they've got an Auburn team. You've got Kentucky down the stretch, Vanderbilt, two opportunities for Mississippi State to get wins, and then you finish up with Mississippi State. So they're going to have to steal one, and everybody that I've talked to have always said that Mike Leach is a guy that he's going to lose a couple, but he's going to win a couple too that you don't expect. So this could be an opportunity if Mississippi State sneaks up on A&M. I'll say this. Coming off the loss to Arkansas, if Jimbo and the Aggies, specifically Jimbo, loses this game against Mississippi State, that $100 bazillion contract's not going to smell very good to all those boys in those white breeches.
No. I think, like you said, Mike Leach historically, loses a couple, wins a couple. Well, I think he's getting ready to lose a couple. And, who they sneak up on, I'm not sure. I would say A&M, except for the fact that A&M got beat down last week. It's not a good week to catch them. I have a feeling Jimbo's had their attention for a couple days. And they hopefully, you would think Texas A&M would have something to prove. They're not going to sneak up on Alabama. Famous last words. They'll probably do it. Coach Leach will probably call me or something. There's some teams you can sneak up on. Like I said, there's talent there. The defense keeps them in ball games. The offense has some tools, but I don't know. I just there's just something there. They're in trouble. The SEC West is not a place to fall behind and try to figure out your team chemistry mid-year. So I don't know.
I mean, I'm watching the game, and I'm, even watching it and knowing what the score is, I'm like, how in the world is this team not leading this game? How in the world is this team down 21-3 in the third quarter? Because they played so well, and like I said, they only had the one fumble.
Well,
I just it just baffled me watching the game, and
well,
I just something's just not right.
well, I'll say this, and this probably isn't fair, and I'm sure people that are huge fans, and I'm sure he's a great kid and he's nice to puppies, but they got to get a quarterback in. I mean, he puts up numbers, but I really believe that's a product of the system. I think everyone that's ever been in the air raid puts up numbers. But Will Rogers, he checks down, and I don't know if that's him or the fact that the offensive line can't block well enough to give him time to let the receivers develop downfield. I mean, that offense will work with maybe, throwing it downfield if they have a quarterback that can deliver it. But, I mean, you saw that the interception he threw the other day was just a terrible throw and killed a drive. He just didn't have the arm to get it there. And so, I mean, I don't know. I think they're going to be limited as long as their quarterback is checking down. I mean, he is almost statistically throwing it backwards sometimes. I mean, you're like, well, he threw for 450 yards. Well, hell, he threw 60. He completed 52 passes. He should have.
Yeah,
So,
you made a good point at the very beginning when you talked about some throws that he missed, and he did, and it's not. It was some were slightly overthrown, but one was a touchdown that he overthrew, and the other was a huge third down play in the third quarter, and that's when Mississippi State was forced to punt. Both those were throws that a major Division I quarterback has to make, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about. So,
oh, yeah.
that's in that type of offense, you've got to make those throws, and he's had a couple of those situations this year.
Well,
So,
I mean, I've had a college coach tell me before, and that's coached at all levels. He said college football, more so than pro football, is a quarterback's game, and that if you have a dominant quarterback, that's why he said never bet against a team with a senior quarterback experienced. Now with COVID, I don't know what a senior is anymore. But he said if you have a quarterback who can play college football, you can be in any game. And there's a lot to that. Look at the teams that have success these days with the way the offenses are. They're the ones that have the dominant quarterbacks.
that's a great point, and I tend to agree. Ole Miss had a week off, and Lane Kiffin was pretty adamant that it was a terrible week off. In regards to he wanted to keep playing, and even some of the players in the Monday press availability was talking about how they were disappointed that they were not able to practice. Weren't able to play last week, and the stats actually back up that teams that are playing Alabama off a bye week have a much better chance of winning. Obviously, so you get 2 weeks to prepare for that Nick Saban offense and defense. So Alabama and Ole Miss on Saturday. Line opened at 20. I think it's down to 14.5. Some books opened it at 17. I don't know what to expect. I mean, you and I talked last week about how the history always sides with Alabama. It's not just with Ole Miss, with everybody that plays Alabama. And Ole Miss has only won in Tuscaloosa, I think, twice. And, I think this is an opportunity. You talked about a quarterback league. Well, Ole Miss has got one in Matt Corral. He's one of the best in the country. Every eye in the college football world will be on this game. And it's an opportunity for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss to take a step. And, Matt Corral Monday, John said that, no disrespect to Alabama, but we're not really interested in them. We're not worried about them. And the funny part about that is nobody really picked up that quote and ran with it because they know that Matt Corral meant what he said. He wasn't being cocky. He was being confident. And I think that's a big difference between the two.
Oh, yeah. And, to me, and I thought of this today when I was listening to something, and only time will tell, but if Ole Miss were to win this game, the quote or the moment that everyone needs to go back to is last year's game when Ole Miss lost and the Vaught Hemingway crowd rightfully gave a very nice ovation to the Ole Miss team. And you remember what Kiffin said? I mean, he went into the press conference and Lane said, I mean, that was nice of them to do, but we came to win games, not come close. And, and not get moral victories. And since that time, I think that's the attitude he's tried to instill in his team, to change the culture. That, the days of just saying, well, we gave them a good fight, but we're just not as we just don't have what the Alabamas of the world have. I mean, he's trying to change the culture, saying, well, that's not the case anymore. And Corral, I mean, is living embodiment of it. I mean, dear Lord, we've talked about it before. He's locked in, but is there anyone more confident right now in college football than Matt Corral? And like you said, it's not cocky. It's just we're going to do what we do, and I think I can do it better than anyone else. And so, I mean, it'll be fun to watch on that. I mean, it's going to be crazy. I think Vegas isn't wrong a lot. So they say it's 14 and over/under's 80. Then over/under's probably 80 and it's 14.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the largest over/under I think I read somewhere in like the history of modern day college football. And so I expect a lot of points to be scored. The line, you're right. I mean, they didn't build Las Vegas by being wrong. They built it by being right. And obviously that line is put out to have equal amounts of bets on each side. I mean, I get that. But the number of points, I mean, I'm sorry, the spread is just so big. I mean, I expected to come out to be anywhere from 8 to 12. Opening up at 17 and then like coming down to 14. I guess that's pretty fair, but I mean that's still a really big line for an opportunity for people that are predicting upsets. And there've been a couple of national people that have come out and said that they think Ole Miss is going to win the game straight up.
Yeah.
John, let's talk about that just for hypothetically. If we talk next week and Ole Miss has beaten Alabama, name your score, 42 to 35 or whatever. Let's say that's the score. How did it happen?
Alabama turned it over. They did something they didn't do last year because, I mean, Ole Miss is as great a fight as they put up last year. Ended up losing by, 2 touchdowns?
Yeah, but Ole Miss didn't force Alabama to punt, and they didn't stop them at all.
Right. So,
not once.
But, I mean, that line from Vegas tells me, Brad, that they think the experts think that Ole Miss that this is basically a rematch of what happened last year. Look at the over/under. Look at the line. If Ole Miss wins, Alabama turned it over. Bryce Young, somehow something. I mean, if you look when Ole Miss has won in 14 and 15, there's been some turnovers. Matt Corral continued the role he's on. He might can get away with 1 interception. He can't have 2 interceptions and win. He can't have a 5 interception game like against LSU and still be in there. If he has 5 interceptions, Ole Miss may get 70 hung on. But so he's played well. They've forced some turnovers, and honestly, we talk about Corral. If Ole Miss were, I think for Ole Miss to come away and win, the Rebels have to dominate on the ground. They have to run the football, and kind of score that way, or control the game that way to set up Corral throwing the ball. That's their recipe because they're going to give up points. They are, and improved defense or not, they're going to give up points. But they can't win a game. They cannot win a 55-50 game. They just cannot. They can win a 42-35 game. They keep Alabama under 35, they can win that game. They cannot win a 60-58 shootout. So
how big of a
that's what I think. I don't know.
How big of a deal is the crowd, the environment, the pressure? How big of a deal is that for either Lane Kiffin, Jaron Ely, and most importantly Matt Corral?
Yeah, I mean, let me say this. I think the crowd is not a big deal at all for Lane Kiffin. If there is one person in this world who A, is not intimidated by Nick Saban or anyone, or B, affected by he may be the most chill human being on earth. And so it's not going to affect him. I think, I'm not sure it's Corral or Ely or those guys because they played a couple years ago. But remember, there weren't crowds last year really with COVID. So
right.
There's a lot of guys who have not had to play in a big time atmosphere. And make no mistake, it's 2:30. sun's out and 100,000 people are going to be arriving to the stadium. And so, but I think he's changed. I think Kiffin is really pushing the culture. I just don't think those guys are going to come out. They're not going to come out scared. Dear Lord, they're just going to come out and do what they do. They are assassins, at least on the offensive side of the ball. They just think this is what we do. We talk about how fast they go. You have to be we say efficient. You have to be very calm, cool, and confident to play at the pace they play at. So I don't think it'd be that big a factor.
I'm fascinated, and you and I talked about this earlier today. I'm more fascinated with the Arkansas game than the Alabama game. And I know people think I'm insane by saying that, but here's why. Matt Corral has had to go an entire year hearing about how terrible he played against Arkansas. And then you brought up a pretty interesting fact of Ole Miss fans are kind of scarred by Arkansas because of the 07 OT game, because of 4th and 26, because of this, that, and the other. And, I get all that. They never play well in Fayetteville. I don't think they've won just a handful of times in Fayetteville anyway. But it's in Oxford, and there are a lot of onions to be peeled back, a lot of layers to this Arkansas-Ole Miss game. So I'm not putting the cart before the horse. I've got too much Alabama history between Ole Miss and Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Every time I've been to a game in Tuscaloosa, it has been an absolute train wreck for Ole Miss. It has been a road. I once saw Santonio Beard run for 279 yards against the Ole Miss defense in the early 2000s. Do you remember that name?
I do not, but yeah, wow.
Yeah, his name was Santonio Beard, and nobody had ever heard of him. And then he played against Ole Miss one day. It was one night game, and we sat in the end zone and watched him run like Herschel Walker. And I said from that moment on, I don't know that I would ever go back. And I went back, and I saw Sean Alexander run for around 300 that night. And it's just it is a game to where I've never seen Ole Miss play very well. I was not at the 15 game. I was not there. I watched that one. And had it not been for the bounce off the helmet. Now, that wasn't the only score. Everybody makes that out like, Hugh had a good game plan that night.
Yes.
I give him credit. People make like it was a fluke they won that game. It really wasn't. That bounce pass and when Chad should have been sacked, but it bounced off someone's head and went to Adebayo for the touchdown. That was just 7 points. That wasn't the remaining of those points. So I just have kind of a jaded view of the Ole Miss Alabama game.
Well, back to the 15 game real quick. They make a big deal about and even Lane mentioned in his press conference, you bounced off somebody's head. That's how we'll score. Remember that game, the Alabama fans left with 8 minutes to go in the game, so they were being beat about 21.
Yeah.
And so, but no, I agree. I've been to Alabama. The first game I ever went to the University of Alabama and watched, I watched Ole Miss play them when I was in law school. And you remember Michael Myers, who played defensive end.
Oh, yeah.
I remember thinking, and my father, God rest his soul, looked at me and said, Paul Head was our quarterback, or was the Rebels quarterback. And my father looked and said, son, do you think they're going to kill Paul Head today? Because he hit him so much. And so, yeah, I agree. But I like we talked about, I think Alabama's Alabama. Everything is on Alabama's side going into that game. I know there's people saying, Ole Miss can do this and do that, and this is their chance. If Alabama wins, Alabama wins. They're number one for a reason. The more interesting thing to me is Ole Miss's reaction to that. Is that, if they go into Alabama and get, just run out by 40, is it the whole, well, maybe we weren't any good, or, the defense isn't any good, or they've been exposed, blah, blah, blah. Or is it a close game, or, what happens? But, yeah, they come right home. And that Arkansas game has a recipe. Arkansas is just built different than most SEC teams. And they're actually built in a way that could cause Ole Miss problems. They run the football downhill. And we'll talk about that next week. But, I think they're more of a matchup nightmare than Alabama is. I think Alabama's problem is just they're freaking Alabama, and they're 5 stars, 4 deep, and there's no, you can't blink against Alabama. You can blink against Arkansas. You just don't match up well against them.
Yeah. So what do you think happened Saturday?
I think it's going to be very similar to last year. I think there will be some back and forth, especially early. I do not think, I don't think Alabama drops into this drop 8. Let's confuse Matt. Let's let Matt Corral. No, I don't think that's in Nick Saban or Pete Golding's makeup.
Because they know that Ole Miss has 3 really good running backs. It'll eat them alive if they do that.
That's exactly right. I think, I mentioned earlier, I think running the ball is a key to success. I think that Alabama's not stupid. If they go into drop 8, they realize that they've just conceded the ground game to Ole Miss. And I think they're going to man up and try to force. I think they can get pressure on Matt Corral. What happens? I don't know. If it's close going in the fourth, I'll say this. If the exact same scenario plays out as last year, where it's a back and forth game going into the fourth quarter, I like Ole Miss. I do like that. I don't think they win a 60-point game, but I like from that standpoint because I think they'll continue to show their confidence. Some turnovers happened earlier. I don't know. Ole Miss could get beat 20 points.
Yeah,
I mean it's there.
So I mean the rest. I mean it could come off the rails easy. And then you have to ask your question. And I was going to ask you this earlier, and I'll ask it now. But hypothetically, if Corral comes in and just absolutely just blows it up and has 2 or 3 interceptions, can he rebound? And we know that he can because he did last year. Yeah,
he can. I think the problem is, all year we've said that Ole Miss's defense has done well because they've forced some stops and the offense has been able to get ahead, and it's just hard to get ahead. It's hard to catch up with an Ole Miss offense, like Herb Street, I think, said, when Ole Miss is rolling. But if there's one team that could force, even if they went down 21 points, if there's one team in the country that could force stops or force turnovers out of Ole Miss and then get the ball and go score, it's Alabama.
Yeah.
And so now the flip side of that, if those turnovers come early, like you just mentioned, I mean, sure, I think Matt Corral could throw a couple interceptions and he could still statistically have a good game. But does that lead to 2 turnovers and next thing you know, Ole Miss gets beat 38-21? Yeah, maybe. So, I mean, now I'll say this. If Nick Saban gets a chance to hang 80, he's going to hang 80. I don't care what he says.
I don't either. I completely agree. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch, that's for sure. And we'll see what happens as the college football world will be looking at Tuscaloosa on Saturday. By the way, I think Georgia beats Arkansas 38-14. Remember I said that.
I don't think they can score 38 points. I think they win 28-7.
Yeah, they're going to beat Arkansas like a ready mule. I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big believer in Arkansas.
I can tell. I can tell. You and Sam Pittman need to work some things out.
He's John Cox. I'm Brad Logan. We'll see everybody next week here on the Mississippi Morning Quarterback. John's always a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
You've been listening to The Brad Logan Show. Download the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever podcasts are found. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a review online. Be sure and check us out on Twitter at Brad Logan COTE, as well as Facebook, Brad Logan Media, and find the show on YouTube. From the Grove to the Junction, this has been The Brad Logan Show, a presentation of the Logan Media Network.